They say everyone has a nightmare story. Some you hear at sleepovers, others you live through and wish to God you could forget. These next 3 stories, our viewers sent them in, and we're telling them exactly how they experienced it, in their own words. You've been warned. This is not for the soft-hearted. These stories are raw, disturbing, and real. My name's Ethan. I was 19 when this happened, back when I was still figuring life out, still stupid enough to think cheap rent was a blessing. It was sophomore year in Ohio. I didn't get a dorm, so I scrambled to find off-campus housing. Ended up in this rundown student co-op a few miles off campus. Cheap, old, smelled like mold and burnt weed. But I was broke and desperate. Plus, it had a lock on the door and Wi-Fi. What else did I need? The house was split into 3 units. Each unit had its own kitchen and common area. Students, mostly. Some graduate students. Some older weirdos who never talked. But the one who haunted me? She lived in Unit B, middle-aged, probably late 50s, maybe older. Greasy gray hair tied in a loose bun. She always wore this crusty, oversized pink robe that hung open just a little too far. Her face was saggy, like she hadn't slept in years. And she had this limp, like her spine was bent wrong. But what freaked me out wasn't her look. It was the way she watched. She never smiled, never blinked, just stood in common spaces, dead silent, staring at people like she was taking mental snapshots for later. One night, I was in the kitchen cooking ramen when I noticed her in the corner, literally standing behind the fridge door like she was hiding, eyes locked on me. Didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. I asked my roommate about her. He laughed and said, "Oh yeah, the shadow lady? She's always been here. Don't engage, just ignore her." Shadow lady? Was that a nickname or a warning? That week, I spotted her outside my window at night, just standing in the middle of the street, staring up. It was freezing. Her robe was half open. Her face was pale as a corpse. I waved at her like an idiot, thinking she was just a sad old woman. She jumped, literally bounced on her feet like a kid getting a birthday gift, and ran toward her unit. It was the most disturbing joy I've ever seen. Not just excited, obsessed. From that moment on, I knew. She wasn't just some sad loner. She was watching me. Days later, I walked out of my room at 1 a.m., midweek, and nearly pissed myself. She was right outside my door. Still. Silent. Her head tilted like a broken doll. I said nothing. Neither did she. She just turned and walked away. Slowly, like she wasn't leaving. Just waiting. I didn't sleep that night, and that was before I found her inside my closet. A few nights later, I lost my room key. Not a huge deal. I had a spare. But it bothered me. I was obsessive about locking my door, especially with her in the house. I tried to let it go. Then came the night I woke up, 3:14 a.m. No alarm, just this gut-deep cold like someone had opened a freezer inside my chest. And then, it was coming from my closet every few seconds, like something was shifting inside, breathing. I sat up in bed, frozen. Not scared. Not yet. Just confused. The kind of confusion where your body wants to move, but your brain's still buffering. Then the sound changed. It wasn't bumping. It was scratching. Long, deliberate scrapes, like nails dragging across wood. Slow. Cruel. Intentional. I snapped out of it, grabbed the metal desk lamp off my nightstand. Heart pounding. I wasn't going to be the idiot who dies screaming in his underwear. I crept toward the closet, lamp gripped like a bat. My hand was shaking so bad I could barely hold it. I took one deep breath, and I ripped the door open. She was inside, crouched between my hoodies and boxes like a goddamn insect. Her knees were bent wrong, head tilted back at an unnatural angle, and she was smiling. wide and cracked and soaked in drool. Her eyes were fully dilated, pupils blown out like black holes. She had one of my neckties wrapped around her throat. Tight, not choking, just holding it, like she was trying it on. In her other hand, a kitchen knife, stained. I didn't know with what, and I didn't want to. I screamed, real this time. Not a tough guy yell, but pure animal terror. She lunged at me with the knife, teeth clenched so tight her gums bled. I fought back, slammed her against the wall, the closet, the floor. She bit into my shoulder like a dog, drew blood. I felt the knife drag across my arm, not deep, but enough to burn. My roommate Lee burst in, shirtless and wide-eyed. Together, we pinned her down. She was foaming at the mouth, growling like a rabid animal. Her robe was open now, hanging off her like skin peeling from bone. Her body was bruised, decayed, like she hadn't eaten in weeks. We screamed for help. She just stared at me, never blinked, like I was still hers. The police came fast, guns drawn, tasers out. They dragged her away. She didn't say a word, not a scream, not a whisper. But when they cuffed her, they found my lost room key in her pocket. She'd been inside, for days, maybe, watching me sleep, listening, planning. We found out later she wasn't even a tenant. She was the property manager's sister, mentally unstable, off her meds, dumped in a vacant room to rot. She shouldn't have been there, but no one said anything. No one cared. She almost killed me. I moved out 2 weeks later. I still don't sleep with my closet closed, because sometimes I swear I hear that slow, wet bump, and I remember her smile. My name's Rachel, but this isn't my story. It's about my neighbor, Zack, and the girl who nearly gutted him alive. I've lived in this Arizona suburb for 22 years. Peaceful, sunny, middle-class dreamland. Think BBQs and sprinklers. You'd never guess something so ugly happened here. Zack moved in across the street. Young guy, mid-20s, flashy car, clean sneakers. Wore cologne so strong I could smell it from my porch. He seemed like a spoiled influencer, but he was polite. Even shook my husband's hand and called me ma'am. Said he worked in entertainment doing freelance for content creators. I had no idea what the hell that meant, but he paid his bills and waved hello, so I didn't pry. A week later, she showed up. Tall, blonde, way too skinny. Wore high heels at noon, and those shorts that looked painted on. Fake tan, fake smile, real crazy eyes. She let herself into Zack's house like she owned the place. At first I thought, girlfriend. Then I noticed something off. She only showed up when he was gone, never stayed long, always had her own key. That wasn't normal. Still, I kept my mouth shut. I'm retired, not nosy. But then came the fighting. One day I was watering my garden when I heard shouting across the street. Loud. Brutal. She was standing in Zack's driveway screaming, her face red, hands flailing, mascara streaking down her cheeks like war paint. I swear she spit in his face. He just stood there, frozen, ashamed, like a dog that knew better than to bite back. She drove off like a bat out of hell, tires screeching, middle finger in the air. I thought it was over. It wasn't. A few nights later, cops flooded the street, flashing lights, yellow tape. I threw on a robe and ran out with my husband. Half the neighborhood was on their lawns, whispering. We watched them wheel Zack out on a stretcher, shirtless, soaked in blood. His chest was torn open like she tried to carve her name into him. He was still alive, but barely. The cops walked out next, dragging her in handcuffs. No fight, no struggle, just that same blank stare she always had, like she wasn't even in the same world as the rest of us. I'll never forget her hands, drenched in red, and her smirk, like she was proud of it. We found out later she'd copied his house key months ago. She tracked his location, cloned his phone, went through every drawer, every message, every inch of his life. And worse, She planted hidden cameras in his bedroom, watched him sleep, watched him bring other girls home, watched him jerk off. She saw everything, every breath, every betrayal. The night Zack broke up with her, she waited until he passed out on the couch and stabbed him in the ribs. He woke up choking on blood. They said she missed his heart by less than an inch. Zack survived. Barely. They had to stitch his insides back together like a butchered animal. 23 staples across his stomach, a punctured lung, fractured ribs, and a scar shaped like her rage. I visited him 2 weeks later, when he was finally home. He was pale, trembling, hooked up to painkillers, still too scared to sleep without locking every door and window 3 times. He told me everything, and it was worse than any of us guessed. Her name wasn't Ellie. That's what she told him. But her ID said Natalie White. Turns out she'd changed her name multiple times. She wasn't a girlfriend. She was a professional parasite, a gold-digging sociopath who preyed on rich, lonely guys. Stalked their socials, found weak points, inserted herself into their lives. Zack? He was just her next obsession. She'd found his spare key under a flower pot, made a copy, started coming over when he wasn't home, stole his passwords, logged into his phone, went through his camera roll, notes app, search history. She even kept a journal, handwritten pages, front and back, describing every little thing she loved about Zack. I love the way his mouth moves when he lies. I want to hear him beg. I want him to cry. He's mine. If I can't have him, no one can. The cops said when they searched her apartment, they found a jar of his fingernail clippings, a photo of him sleeping, taken from the foot of his bed, one of his worn shirts, wrapped around a dildo. She'd been watching him from inside the house. He showed me where she put the cameras, one behind the AC vent, one inside a smoke detector. She watched him sleep, shower, eat, watched him jerk off. She saw everything. The night of the attack, Zack had brought a girl home. Some girl from Tinder. Just a one-night thing. Natalie must have seen it live through her phone. When the girl left around midnight, Natalie came in through the back door. Quiet. Calm. Wearing gloves. Carrying a kitchen knife. Like it was all routine. She stood at the foot of the couch for 40 minutes, watching him sleep. Then she straddled him and pressed the knife against his chest, whispered in his ear, "You'll love me now." She carved a heart between his ribs, dug the blade in deeper with every beat. He woke up halfway through and started screaming. The only reason he lived? She hesitated, started sobbing, said she didn't want him to die, kissed the blood off his lips and whispered, "I forgive you." When the cops arrived, she didn't run. She just smiled and asked, "Can I still see him again?" Zack moved out 2 days later, never said goodbye, just disappeared. And I don't blame him. Sometimes I look across the street at that house and swear I see someone still standing in the window.